Okay, sounds good.
Right.
All right. Welcome, everybody. How's it going?
Hello.
Okay, so I still need my chroma key is kind of out of whack right now, so I'm gonna try to fix that. Freaking green screens, man.
Yeah, I just use a magic one because I don't have a green screen.
Honestly, that might work better for me than the silly green. Because the problem is if I have like a window open, then the outside lighting color like changes the hue slightly. And so that probably means I need the lights in my room to be a little brighter, but whatever. Just have to turn it up till the real things start disappearing. Okay, that should be about right. Dave, thank you so much for the 26 months. Can't believe it's already been 2 years and 2 months. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we've got that going. The stream is going. Let's get a stretch in as the redemption requires. Go left, go right. How's your morning going, Wally?
Good. Just running around as usual.
Okay. I think, are you all ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right, sweet. Well, I will recenter my camera and then I'll hit the record button and we will be off to the races. Just gotta make sure I got all my windows open. Too many windows. Okay. Got that. Sweet. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Factory Must Grow. This is episode 11, and today we are joined by Wally 1169. How you doing, Wally?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. It's a beautiful Sunday. For those who don't know, Wally is a variety streamer focusing on strategy and automation gaming, much like myself. And what games do you mostly play, Wally?
Factorio is huge, of course. Against the Storm is also very big, especially on YouTube, or specifically on YouTube. On my personal time, I just play more of the same kind of stuff. Really, I do dabble a little bit in a couple other games, a little bit of console gaming again for the first time in several years recently, but mostly PC games, mostly Steam games.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. We'll talk more about those specific games here in a bit, but you are a man after my own heart. I think the strategy games really call to us. There's so much to do, so much to automate.
For sure.
So today on the cast, we'll be starting with another mod spotlight. As usual, we'll discuss the recent Factorio Friday facts, which are pretty exciting today. And then our main topic will be Wally bringing his perspective on the different varieties of automation games he's played because he's played a lot of them, far more than I have. So, the mod spotlight for today is Exotic Industries. This is a total overhaul mod that was made by Prele Zero a little over a year ago. And it has only about 21,000 downloads, but I think it should have more. And Wally, what can you tell us about Exotic Industries?
So it's the successor to 248K, which I know some other folks have played played previous to EI coming out. But it's really a good overhaul mod it has a bit of complication to it, but it's not so huge and complicated that it's overwhelming. Um, and I played it recently on Twitch. I didn't make it all the way through, partially because they released a major version a couple of months ago that would break a lot of the recipes, and so I kept going with the old version for a while. And I think eventually I'm just gonna kind of start it again and play it again, and hopefully make it through this time a little bit faster, maybe.
Yeah, so what primarily does it do to the game? Because there's a lot of different types of overhaul mods, right? Like there's space exploration, which is a massive overhaul, and then there's things like Bob's Angels, which are big overhauls, but they're still kind of the same core Factorio experience. Where does EI fit into that?
It's a little more like it's actually kind of in between because you start out with a very core Factorio experience in the first age, the Dark Age, and that's kind of the theme of exotic industries. Is there are six different ages, and you unlock each age by completing enough technology research in the previous age. So the first age is the Dark Age, and everything is burner based, everything. And you spend a couple of hours there, or at least I spent a couple hours there. I tend to play slower than a lot of folks, so that could be part of it. But I you spend a couple hours there anyway, and you actually have to plan for having fuel on belts, having fuel to every assembly you build. And so you end up with half belt of fuel, half belt of this or that. And you kind of go through that age for a couple of hours, and which is kind of unique in the mods that introduce a burner age and then the next age, by the way, which is Steam, because some of them it's like, oh, you have a burner age, but then you could just skip the Steam age, or you can kind of just do the burner age like you do in Factorio, where you just have a few burner smelters. Maybe you end up with a burner assembler or something like that, but you really get through it in like 20 minutes and then you're moving on. This,
Right.
and I don't know specifically with the predecessor 248K, but at least with Exotic Industries, you actually spend time in the Dark Age. I think I spent about 2 hours in the Dark Age, another 2 to 4 hours in the Steam Age, and then the third age, electricity, which kind of gets you to the sort of traditional Factorio.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that you actually have to spend time there. And I know Exotic Industries has some really cool mechanics in the later game. I haven't played it myself yet, and it's on my list, but too many things on the list. But I know it's
And
got some like specific beacon mechanics and stuff.
yeah, I think I didn't get to the beacons either. I didn't make it that far before I switched gears a little bit. But earlier in the game, in the I think it's in the Steam Age, you get oil distillation, which is actually a little bit more of a realistic oil processing system than vanilla Factorio. And you make distillation columns, and you take the output from the mixed oil output from the refined crude oil from the refineries, and you feed it into a distillation column, and out comes one of the products and another mixed oil product, and then you feed into another distillation column, and out comes another usable oil product and another like mixed oil that's slightly lighter, slightly reduced, slightly
Yeah.
whatever from that. And so you end up with, I think, five distillation columns to pull all five products out. And at the end, you come out with, I think it's Coke or something along that
Yeah,
line.
yeah.
It's a
That's cool.
solid. So it's really kind of a thing, a puzzle to set up a little bit, but it kind of also really looks cool once it's going. So it's kind of a fun thing to have.
Yeah, that's sweet. Yeah, so EI, Exotic Industries, is a great overhaul mod if you've been wanting to get into them. It's got really cool visuals. It's a total overhaul mod, but it's not so complicated that, you're going to die immediately, like Pyanodons or even space exploration. Once you get to space is pretty complicated with all the logistics and stuff. So if you want something that's a little bit more manageable, I would highly recommend giving Exotic Industries a try.
And if you're interested in overlapping with other mods, it is compatible with Crestorio 2,
Oh,
Space
yeah.
Exploration, and some others as well.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I think BZ is on the list. Is that right?
I don't remember all the specifics, but definitely several of them. And there are some, bridge mods that are available that were made by third parties to bridge other mods into.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that's great. Okay, let's talk about the new Factorio Friday facts. So, Gleba is the title of this one, if I'm pronouncing that right, and it is the
Yeah.
next spoiled planet. How are you pronouncing it?
Gleba or Gleba, I'm not sure which one.
Yeah, Gleba, 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 something like that. It's Gleba is the spelling. But
Hmm.
so yeah, the basics is that this is the third planet to be spoiled, which is kind of the final of the initial planets. So the way that they've kind of talked about the planet progression is there's three planets that come after Nauvis, and you kind of have to go to one at a time. And you can pick as the player which one you want to go to first, then which one you want to go to second, and then third. And then once you've gotten all the resources from all three, some form of resources from them, you'll be able to finally go to the fifth and final planet. And so Gleba is the last of kind of the three middle planets. And the to summarize the vibe, it's kind of like Dagobah meets like sea floor underwater like coral. So it's very like fungusy, corally. There's like tendrils of plants growing everywhere. It's very swampy. It feels almost a little bit magical. It's almost like an enchanted forest, but mixed with a swamp and coral vibe. I don't know. What do you think about it? The looks.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty gorgeous looking planet. I mean, I like that they've gone with this sort of hardcore theme for each planet. It kind of you mentioned Dagobah. It kind of reminds you a little bit of how Star Wars has a whole. Each planet has one biome, and um, it seems like the whole planet is one single biome, whether that's Dagobah or uh, Tatooine, or even in some ways, the capital is just a giant city. It's one huge city, the entire planet, and it's kind of they've kind of done that with these three planets, even though Novice still has the slightly varied biomes of the vanilla game or the 1.0. Um, they've kind of focused and said, okay, let's make this whole planet be this new kind of biome or smaller biome set, rather than being a wide variety.
Yeah, I actually hadn't thought about it that way before, but you make a really good point there. I agree. I think it's really neat that they, rather than the expansion or DLC or Factorio 2 or whatever you want to call it, rather than making Nauvis have a bunch of new biomes, they've added entire new planets, which kind of are the biomes. And like you said, there are these little sub biomes within each planet. Like for example, Fulgora has like the plateaus versus the like oil sand ocean, but like those are more like sub biomes than they are real biomes. And I think Gleba is kind of the same way. They talk about like there's a highland kind of area that's a little bit drier, and then there's kind of like a swampy area with more of these fungus tree things, and then yeah, I mean, there's a music video on the Factorio Friday Facts website that spoils and shows the music off as well as the visuals of the planet. And we can't really do that video justice. So you should go watch that
For
yourself
sure.
because it's really cool. And the music is really neat. It had these kind of magical vibes. It almost felt, I don't know, like this energetic kind of uplifting vibe. It felt like Terraria almost, like when you first start out in Terraria. And I haven't played much of Terraria, and I still thought of the Terraria music when I heard it because it has some
I
of the same synth effects, I think.
Yeah, and then speaking of biomes, the as yet unrevealed red biome that hopefully there's a bit behind that, because they kind of left it hanging there on purpose. So I'm assuming there's a big
Yeah.
a big drop there.
Exactly. So in the Factorial Friday Facts, it's basically the whole Friday Facts. It's not a ton of information. It's more just a story. They kind of tell the story of the different subbiomes as you travel through them. And I think they did the same thing for the other planets. And so this being the first week of the spoiler, it's more just a visual teaser. And so you should go read it. It's really well written. It's kind of a fun journey through the parts of Gleba. And then at the end, they say, now there is a new sound, the sound of great waves crashing, followed by an earth-shaking stomp, 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 each one louder than the last. And so they are spoiling some sort of large creature that is assumed to be hostile. Do you think it'll be hostile, or will it be just a large creature that's more of a passive thing? What do you think?
I'm actually hoping it's not hostile because I tend to either turn off biters anyway, or at least put them on passive mode, peaceful mode, because I don't really find the biter combat part of the game that much fun. I know that there's the logistic puzzle involved with making sure you get the ammo to the gun, to the the turrets and things, but I've never really found the combat part of it fun, which is weird because we'll get into it, but I played a lot of RTS games,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all about combat, but just the randomness, or the I don't know, the zerginess, I guess, of the biters really just that kind of combat doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll probably get into this, like you said, a little bit more later, but I'm gonna go on a slight tangent here. Do you like tower defense games?
I've tried to like them. I've played a few of them on occasion. Not so much.
Okay.
I've tried, but it's not really been something that I've spent a lot of time on.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I think I fall somewhere in between that where I'm kind of with you. I tend to not love the combat in Factorio. Sometimes I'll turn it on, but I've probably played more with it off than on, especially with the vanilla combat. I don't find that very interesting anymore at all because it kind of is this. It's a challenge that you have to solve because if you don't solve it, the biters eat your base. And then
Hmm.
if you do solve it, then it's just solved. And it's not that interesting anymore because you just have the walls and the turrets. And as long as you keep them supplied with the right amount of ammo and repair packs, then nothing happens. And so it's kind
Right.
of just this obstacle to expansion. And there's nothing more that's interesting to it past that point. And I have said many times on my streams, I really like combat where the threat is not you losing your base. I would enjoy the combat a lot more if it was done in a way where, and it's kind of hard to imagine how this would work exactly, and it wouldn't be able to work with Factorio the way it is now, but I want my automation game that has combat to have the risk of losing combat not cost me my entire base that I've designed painstakingly. And
Right.
and I think that's part of why I don't like the combat is because I want combat where sometimes I do lose. I want it to be hard enough and challenging enough where if I don't invest the proper resources and time designing and building and figuring out, my defenses, they do get overwhelmed and they get blown up. But then the penalty for that shouldn't be my entire base gets destroyed, but some other smaller penalty, or maybe not even a penalty, but just I don't get a bonus or some resource that I would have gotten if I had succeeded. And Warp Torio kind of had that, right? Because if you lose, well, you can just go underground into your little hidey hole. And so I kind of enjoyed that Warp Torio feel where I could retreat underground and the biters could have their free reign above me and I could still work on my factory underground.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I've never played. I've only seen just little bits of it, so I've never played it. It's interesting. I may have to
Yeah,
give that a shot.
it's really hard at first with the default settings, but then once you kind of get a foothold, it's not too bad, and you can just stay underground if you don't want to collect any resources or anything above ground and work on your factory, and you don't have to worry about it. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Anyway, so yeah, Gleba, it's going to be sweet. Hopefully, we'll have a lot more to talk about next week in terms of the details. But yeah, any other thoughts on Gleba?
Just wondering what the next planet, the final planet's going to be. I mean, they're missing one big biome set, and that is frost, ice, snow. I'm wondering if that's going to be the final planet, or if there'll be another planet of that, and the final planet will be some hybrid combination type of thing, similar to the way that Elvis works.
Yeah, let me see. Where did they put? Okay, they have a little picture. It was on the original Space Age announcement.
Oh, I might have missed
And
that
they
or
showed like
forgotten.
icons of all five.
Mhm.
Let me see. Yeah, yeah. The final one, it's the colors of it, and this was from when? This was from October. No, August of 2023. So they
Oh,
might have
yeah.
even changed it at this point. But the icon is kind of this bluish whitish marble looking thing. It's almost like it's got clouds. There's a little spot that almost might look like a hurricane. Um, or that could just be snow or a giant mountain or something. So it definitely could be a frozen planet, to your theory.
Could even be a water world. That's
It
another
could
possibility.
be. There's more white than blue though.
Oh, okay.
But
Well, it could be an ice water world though.
yeah, it's definitely not swampy or lava-y. That's for sure.
Mhm.
Whatever it is. So yeah, I'm excited to see what that is as well. But that'll still be a ways down the road. Now,
Oh, for sure.
a slight other thought I had is, and some people on the Reddit were talking about this, is there concern about them being able to finish quote unquote on time for October, which technically hasn't been officially announced. It's just the lead dev said October at the latest in an interview, but they haven't announced anything officially on their website or anything like that. And they mentioned in this Friday Facts that, Gleba is still in development and there are lots of things that are still changing. And, we're not that far from October at this point. So are you
Yeah.
concerned at all?
And yes and no. I mean, they've long. I mean, it took them however many years it was to develop Factorio to begin with, and they've always been a "it'll be done when it's done, it'll be ready when it's ready" type of developer. It doesn't bother me, and they don't make promises they can't keep either. I mean, the base game was kind of evidence of that. They they want the game to be right. They don't want the game to be done on a schedule. So it doesn't bother me that much.
Yeah.
And it'll when it comes, I'll be playing it. It's not a huge concern for me. But on the other hand, just because Glebe is not finished, it could just be like some refinement that they're doing more so than actual, you know, development of it. Like they're tweaking this or that or finishing up this or that, but the main gameplay function of it, whatever it is that we're getting on as our mega building on that planet. I've seen some speculation of uh, oil refinery or chemical plant, um, either one, whichever one it is, or maybe both for that matter,
Hmm.
since they kind of go together in most cases. Eh, that gameplay is probably all there. They're just tweaking some of the visual stuff,
Yeah.
and syncing
It
the
sounds
audio with the
like
visual properly.
Yeah, it sounds like they've got a pretty playable product that they've been testing. And they're just working on ironing out most of the bugs. But it will be interesting, because they haven't. I was surprised when we heard the October announcement from that interview and then nothing came out, in the following weeks in terms of an official announcement. I figured those would be linked. And
Yeah.
so and yeah, maybe I used the wrong word to say does that concern you. It's more just
Mhm.
like in my head I'm kind of thinking, yeah, maybe October's not actually the thing. Maybe that was something the developer kind of said that he maybe shouldn't have said, and they're not going to do it in October because they haven't officially announced it. And so I'm thinking, it might not be October. I guess we'll see, but who
They,
knows.
I don't remember. I wish I had a good enough memory to remember this, but they didn't announce. I don't think the 1.0 official release date until not long before it hit, maybe a couple of months. So
Yeah.
I think they're just kind of and I mean, yes, this is quite a bit different because no one has seen any part of this hands on. Whereas with Factorio in 1.0, like we'd been playing it, some of us for a decade at that point or whatever it had been. So it's a different animal, but also like you said, they've been talking about having played it internally for many months. They'd already been playing it through for months, or at least for a while before they even announced it to begin with. So
Yeah.
back in August. So I'm not that, it's not that big of a deal to me if it's October, or if it's August, or if it's January. It you know And for some friends of ours, i.e., Bold Viking, it'll probably be nice for him if it's a little bit later than sooner.
Yeah, because then he can actually finish Pyanodons, for sure. I'm with you. I think I trust Wooba to do a great job regardless of when it comes out. And like you said, they are a studio that says, hey, when it's done, it's done. We're not going to rush it. And as much as it would suck in terms of it's hard to be patient sense, I think regardless of when it comes out, it will be a great product, and we can look forward to that for sure.
For sure.
All right, so let's move on a little bit. This will kind of take a half interview, half discussion format. Let's start with the slight interview piece. Wally, who are you? What do you do?
Who am I? I'm a variety gamer, as you mentioned at the top. I've been doing this for doing streaming for that matter for about 5 years now. Actually, almost exactly 5 years now. Yesterday was my 5 year channel anniversary, and I got into it just by playing games and hanging out with people who were playing games and doing um uh and also who were streaming and doing YouTube.
So, was there a particular streamer or YouTuber who kind of inspired you to do it yourself, or what kind of gave you that push?
So, yes, Catherine Sky and Caledorn both were sort of the um, influences and the initial influences on me getting started. What specifically started me was we were working on. I was a moderator for them, and we were working on um, a MMO, Factorio MMO plan, and I don't think that was the time that we went for the world record, but we were working on a plan, and we wanted to have some science blueprints put together before we actually started the event, so that we weren't fumbling around trying to put together science builds and things like that. So I said, well, I'll work on some science blueprints. And then I decided, well, I'll stream my work on those science blueprints. And this was June of 2019, and I didn't have a face camera. I didn't actually get a face camera for 2 or 3 years, I think. And but I went live and I just started working on it. Some of the other folks in the Discord came and gave me some feedback on the blueprints I was designing, and that's how it all started. And then I was like, I really like doing this. And I had my headset with my microphone. I didn't have a real microphone. I had the pin mic on the headset, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, it's um, I like doing this. It's kind of weird in a way, but I like doing this, so I'm going to start something else. And then I think I did a Factorio series with a mod called what's it called? Recycling? Um something I've forgotten the name of the mod now. But it kind of gives you a little bit of trash every time you make something, and you have to actually sort through that trash and process it, but also filter out the good stuff that you've intentionally made, and to actually be used and dispose of the trash into a big trash pile. Or then you can recycle it eventually and turn it into real things. And I did a series on that, and I did some other stuff, and I kept going, and I introduced new games, and I kept going, and here we are 5 years later.
That's awesome. How did you get into gaming, even long before the streaming world?
Long before early mid 80s, as a youngish child, my parents had an Atari 2600 and a Commodore 64,
Nice.
and I played both of those. I can't remember what all we had on the Commodore, but I remember Frogger at least. But on the Atari, we had all the usual stuff, all the usual 4-bit games that look like an atrocity now. But I started there. Eventually, we got a Nintendo. I played that. I eventually got a Super Nintendo. I played that. Somewhere along the way, I got a 286, and I played some games on that. I remember Commander Keen, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I can't remember what else I played on there. And then we got a Pentium, Pentium One at some point along the way, and Windows 3.1, and I had all kinds of those. If you remember those classic, those Windows Visual Basic games, there's like a pack of like 100 of them you could buy, and on a set of floppy disks, and They were all really simple, either puzzle games or whatever they were. They were really simple, but I played a huge amount of those. Chips Challenge was one that I played, and there was that ski
Oh
game,
man,
and
you just hit on a nostalgia button. Chips Challenge. Whoa.
that introduced, also some of the early DOS CD-ROM games like Doom and stuff like that that I did play. Even though I've never really been super big into first-person shooters, I played a lot of Doom because I had it, and that's kind of one of the things, from the 80s and the 90s is if you had a game, you played the game because it was a game and you wanted to play a game.
And there
Um,
weren't 5,000 more you could download in 2 seconds.
Right, exactly. You had to play what you had because you didn't have any money, so you were waiting till your next birthday or Christmas or
Hmm.
something to get another game as a gift, or to get money that you could go to the store and buy the game you wanted as with that gift money. So it was lean times in terms of gaming when you were a kid, especially in the 80s and 90s when there wasn't a variety of indie developers that were making all kinds of different games.
Yeah. Oh man. Chips Challenge. My brain's still reeling at hearing those words together. That's
You can
funny.
get it still on Steam.
I should. So
It's like
for
two
those who don't
dollars.
know, it's a puzzle. It's a puzzler where what kind? It's kind of like Baba Is You, I guess. Actually, they're kind of
A
a
little bit.
very similar vibe.
Uh-huh.
Where it's kind of like it's almost like turn based, but the turn is just you moving left, right, up, or down, and there are different puzzle elements, and you push blocks around and step on things, and it's all very interesting, but it's a great game.
For sure.
Okay, so the main thing we want to get into here is about automation gaming, and so I believe you compiled a little bit of a list of the different automation titles you've played. I'm sure we would all be interested to hear that list.
A lot of bit of a list. There's at least a dozen games on this list, and that's one or two of them I haven't played, but I put them on the list anyway, just because I intend to play them sometime.
Honorable
But
mentions.
right, there are the big three, of course. You and I talked about that a little bit in our prep chat for this, but the Factorios, the Satisfactory, the Dice and Sphere programs. Those are the big three. And oh, by the way, we talk about factory games, and what I like to define as a factory game is a game where automation and logistics both are key gameplay components. And I don't know if that's a good global definition or not, but that's kind of the definition that I go by when I determine whether a game is an automation or is a factory game, or if it's a game with automation elements or logistic elements in it.
Yeah, yeah. For example, like in my head, I'm thinking of Anno 1800, which does have like production chains and resources, but
Right.
it's not really a factory game because the
Right.
city building is the main element of it.
Yeah, it's more of it's got the automation component, but not really the logistic component because the stuff just kind of appears from here to there. It doesn't really you're not managing how it's flowing.
Right. And you do need roads and stuff, but it's
Mhm.
far more automated that, yeah, kind of you have to get resources from point A to point B, but it's almost more like you're managing a trucking industry than like a factory.
Mhm. And we can kind of go on that and talk a little bit about like Captain of Industry, for example, which is that, but also it's a lot more factory game than like Anno is. Like there's because you actually are managing a lot more of the logistics with the piping and some of the belting and things like that. Even though it does have the trucks and those types of things carrying the resources around for you, that's kind of uh you know a little bit esoteric for the player because they're kind of doing whatever they want to do. You're not controlling which roads they take or anything like that. It still has a lot of that. Uh, it still has a lot of that logistics management as well.
For sure. So so why don't you go ahead and list some of the games?
So some of the other, the two kind of the next two in line that I think, or at least that I think are in line, are Foundry and Tectonica. Both are in a fairly early access release right now, but they both kind of take the hybrid approach between like Factorio and Satisfactory, with the 3D of Satisfactory, but the very voxel based nature of things. with of like Factorio, of the grid base Factorio. And I've been playing Foundry currently, and it's it kind of has a Minecraft world, which kind of goes back to the the Factorio inspiration of some of the automation based mods in Minecraft. But it's kind of a Minecraft block world. All of the machines are very aligned to the grid. They're very blocky in a way that a lot of the machines in Factorio are, or potentially would be if they were 3 dimensional. And one of the things that kind of stands out is that it's got all the blocks are diggable, and there's you can blast with the explosives and remove the ground blocks with that as well. So it kind of stands out that way. And then on the other hand, there's Tectonica, which has been sort of dubbed by viewers at least as satisfactory in a cave. The machines are a little bit more smoothed, but they're also super rusty and dingy and dirty looking, um, which is kind of an interesting aesthetic for a in a relatively dark cave too. But both of those games are 3D and first person. Tectonica has editable landscape where you can use like this I don't know, like a controlled singularity kind of looking gun to erase some of the landscape, and that's all the dimensions. You can go up and you can go into the cave walls as well as down. um, and it's kind of an interesting kind of um, way to expand your base because you're limited to the size of your cave.
Right. It's a little different. Whereas, like Satisfactory, you just have the sky and you can build up pretty much as you want. I know there's technically a limit, but
Yeah.
realistically, you're never going to get to that limit. And Minecraft, same thing. You can build underground in Minecraft, but you don't have to. Foundry, as you're talking about, is kind of more like Minecraft, where you can easily build above ground, and it would
Hmm.
be weird to build your first base underground, even. But yeah, Tectonic is very different because you're limited. Even though it's a 3D game, you do not have unlimited height to work with.
Yeah. And there actually is a ceiling as well that you can't dig past, which is kind of part of the story. I think we're going to get more in that story at some point, but uh, there is a ceiling that you can't actually dig in, a floor, and probably walls that you can't dig past as well. Just to, I mean, for obvious game reasons, but also because there's some sort of story behind it too. So they kind of you know don't just break the fourth wall. They actually tell you why. They're actually probably going to tell us why there is a fourth wall.
Nice, nice. That's awesome. So I have a couple more questions about those, and we'll get back to that. But real quick, why don't you just list the other factory games, just kind of the titles, just so I can kind of
Yeah.
have in my head what we're working with here.
Yeah, so I mean, they kind of run the gamut a little bit of exactly a factory game or not, but there's Astro Colony, Builderment, Factor Y, Chocolate Factory, Factory Town, Final Factory, Desynced, Plan B Terraform, QB Factorium, Odd Sparks, which I would like to mention a little bit. Then there's games like Automa Chef, which don't really entirely feel like a factory game, but if you look at it, it can be. Mega Factory Titan. I have not played that one, but that's also on my list. Games like Shapes and Beltex are even factory games. There's a game called U Factory, and then one that is unfortunately abandoned, but I actually liked it a lot, called Automation Empire. And that's kind of what I have on my list. There are one or two more that I have like floating around vaguely in my mind that I wasn't able to identify, but um, and depending on your exact definition of a factory game, there's maybe several more, but that kind of gives you a wide gamut of what is out there and what's available as far as factory games or factory adjacent games.
Yeah, that's a great list. I'm sure a lot of those are ones that our viewers haven't heard of or listeners haven't heard of before, and they're going to look up. So definitely write down those and look them up. There are so many as well that are coming out these days. It is an exploding genre, and I
For
find
sure.
that that's both awesome and also in some ways less awesome because you have to weed through some of the crap, so to speak, to find the gems in it these days, because it's like
Hmm.
for a while it felt like all of the factory games were amazing because there weren't that many of them, and only people that really believed in what they were doing and knew what they were doing were actually making the games. And to some level, only people who knew they were going to be successful, or studios that knew they would be successful, were doing it, because it wasn't this like established kind of, oh, everyone can try this and it can be a cash cow. But now that it's become an established genre, all the indie studios are picking it up, all the individual developers like the solo devs are picking it up. And so there's a lot of, just like with every other form of art, there's a lot of good stuff, there's a lot of medium stuff, there's a lot of kind of bad stuff that you're like, I mean, this person tried, but like, it's not good,
Right.
and everything in between. So back to Tectonica specifically, because that's one that I have seen a little bit of gameplay of. I haven't
Mhm.
played it myself, but to me, I think the immediate question that comes to my mind is, why would I not just play Satisfactory? Because that one feels, with Foundry, there's the Minecraft blockiness of it that's different, and there's
Mhm.
some key elements that feel very different than Satisfactory. But Tectonica feels a bit closer to Satisfactory, and I can't really visually, from looking at the game or videos of it, see why would I play that instead.
So, part of the reason that I uh, like it a little bit better in some ways. I mean, it wouldn't say necessarily that I like it better than Satisfactory, but some of the things that stand out to me is like it has some interesting, um, I guess, production loops. Like for example, there's a whole plant growth mechanic in the system or in the game. So you you feed a handful of seeds you pick from plants in the wild into a circular system, and it grows those seeds into plants, harvests them, and feeds them into a thresher that separates the seeds from the usable material of the plant, and then feeds the seeds back out onto your belt again to be used to grow more plants. Meanwhile, those plants, the plant matter, is then processed into some other useful plant-based products that you then need for crafting other things in your base. But the thing that stands out to me the most with Tectonica is sort of the story and the mystery. It's got a lot of unknown in the story, which you learn a little bit and a little bit more as you play through the game and as they release updates that expand the story. But there's a huge backstory to the game and why you're there and what's going on in this cave system that you're stuck in, that you've woken up in with amnesia, and you have to kind of explore around and open these locked doors with a handful of materials that you've made to discover a little bit more of the story, or to discover more technologies, or to discover more something. The whole time you've got this disembodied voice of this well, a spoiler alert, a little bit of spoiler alert, although it's something you'll learn right away almost in the game. This person whose consciousness has been uploaded into this cube that you're carrying around with you, and she's kind of telling you about some things, and then giving you not really hints, but kind of guidance a little bit. So I think, and so Satisfactory may disrupt that and may usurp that part of it when they come out with their 1.0 and their story in the very near future. But the fact that we know almost nothing about why we're even there on that planet, uh, working for Fix It in Satisfactory, that it just kind of leaves it a little bit hollow. So I'm hoping that their story fills that in and makes it a bit of a purpose. But for me, at least right now, Tectonica, it's about the story and the mystery and the discovery of things, as well as building the factory.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that there's a little bit of like the mystery of it is almost even more interesting than the story bit of it. I remember this is a very different game, but I'm sure a lot of people find them close enough to be interesting. But Slime Rancher has not a ton of story, but a lot of mystery to it. It's almost like because there are these doors that you need to unlock, and you have to go around the island and collect different slimes, and you do sort of progress through some technology with the quote unquote money that you earn from your slime ranching. And it's just a really fun mechanic when a game has this idea of, hey, there's this stuff, but you can't look at it yet. You have to do XYZ first. And even like Subnautica has that in some ways. And so, yeah, I find that to be a really compelling reason to keep playing a game. So do you have to produce factory like large amounts of factory stuff to unlock these doors, or how do you get the what you need?
It's not dissimilar to like in Satisfactory when you open up one of the pods, the amount of stuff you need to open a pod. It's kind of like that. You need a few dozen, maybe 100 of something, of one or two things. So it's not like it's a huge amount. But in terms of like the scale of how many items you're producing in both Tectonic and Foundry, it's kind of on the same scale as Satisfactory. It's really mostly measured in items per minute compared to the Factorio items per second, and really it's just that kind of scale in terms of production.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for indulging my curiosity about Tectonica in specific, because that's one that I've had a bit more curiosity about than I think a
Hmm.
lot of the other factory titles. I think most games, in many ways, you can look at the Steam page and a couple videos, and I feel like you get a pretty decent idea for it. But that's one where I haven't quite felt like I've understood much about it, even from
Hmm.
watching some videos. So, in terms of I want to talk a little bit about the breadth of automation gaming, because there's a lot of titles that you've played, and like you said, it's kind of this idea of automation and logistics are kind of these king and queen that are married together as the primary components of these games. But what makes those things different? Because these are all extremely different games, even though they have the
Hmm.
same core gameplay components. So what gives the variety, like thinking about the logistics and how you move things around, what gives that variety in different games? Like, for example, I'm thinking about one that you mentioned. I can't remember the name of it. um Cubifactorium. Like, what makes
Hmm.
that game logistically different than Factorio?
So that one's different and interesting because it's also a colony builder. You're also managing a handful of citizens, and you're so you have to appeal to their happiness and their kind of livelihood, and they're also your mining bots effectively. They actually go out and do the mining work, and they do the building work too. So you're kind of more directing them as a colony, but then you very or fairly early on get uh no, not fairly early on, but you get some automation. They actually end up being your crafting bots too for a while. But then you get some automation where machines run automatically, and you get some logistics where you have belts and things like that and trains to carry resources around. Um, so it's kind of one of those things, like I was saying, they're not all exactly factory games, but they're at
Mm-hmm.
least factory adjacent games
For sure.
where the automation and logistics are at least a very strong component of the gameplay, even if they're not the only major components, because like that one has a colony builder aspect to it as well. So it's a bit of, if you took, you know, maybe a captain of industry type game and you married it with like a RimWorld. Like that's kind
Interesting.
of what QB Factorium is, but it's all very like low poly, voxely art, and um, there's the people will do farming, but then you can automate the farming and stuff later on, and you can do all kinds of kind of interesting things in it that just have a little bit of difference, a little bit of variety, a little bit of uniqueness to each one in each one of these games. Something in each one of these games that kind of give it a little bit of variety and make it a little bit different of a game. This developer focuses on this particular aspect of of the gameplay, and that one focuses on another particular aspect. And each one has a little bit of a difference in their strengths and in their focus, and that's kind of where I like the variety in the automation games.
Yeah, yeah. Give us a couple more examples that spring to the top of your list of like what are some separate takes on things that you've really liked.
For sure. So I mentioned Factory Town. You know, you look at it and it looks like something designed by Crayola and Windows XP. I mean, it doesn't look like a factory game. It's got a
You're so
very
right.
brightly primary colored um, interface and world map. But then when you get into it and you start looking at, oh well, you need this much of this thing to make that much of that thing, and you can belt the stuff on cloth belts, or later on the higher tier belts, metal belts and magic belts. And the fact that it integrates very rudimentary things like harvesting trees and farming and mining, um, with the automation part and the magic part, is really kind of an interesting, compelling game to play. And then, the developer, when he finished the game, then went on to create an idle game version of it, which was kind of a I was a little like, really? Like, how are you gonna make Factory Town into an idle game? But he did. And it's actually a really good idle game if you're interested in idle games, because it's not just an idle game. I mean, like, most of the time now, idle games are mobile games where, you have 10 minutes because you're sitting at a doctor's office waiting for your appointment, or you're on a bus, or you're on a train or whatever, and you're just pecking at your phone. But this one is more like you can play for as long as you want. And it's in Steam. It's on Steam, so it's something you play on your computer, or maybe your Steam Deck, I guess now. But you can play for as long as you want, and you can actually make progress for as long as you want. But the idle comes from the fact that when you are not playing it and time is passing, you're accumulating um, basically like time points that you can spend to accelerate gameplay when you are playing. So it kind of reaches a balance of idle game, but also not one that you're going to be mad at because you have to either put the game down for an hour so that you can accumulate some time, or that you have to pay to play.
Yeah.
If you want more, you got to buy gems or something like that. Like there's no, I mean, you pay a few dollars for the game, whatever the game costs. I can't remember now, $5 or $10 maybe, but that's all you pay. There is no microtransaction. There is no pay to play at all in it after the initial purchase. So that's it. So that Factory Town family, which I saw last that he's creating Factory Town 2 now, that Factory Town family of games is kind of an interesting take on the factory genre, even though Factory Town Idle really isn't a factory game anymore, um, because the everything is magically available for everything else at all times.
Yeah, I would say there's a whole podcast of content to get into the our idle games, factory games conversation, because in one sense you're right, they're not, because like there's no logistics in idle
Right.
games generally, but there's enough overlapping elements, especially in certain idle games with factory games, that I think a lot of fans of factory games are also fans of idle games, at least certain kinds. So I think there's a lot of interesting conversation to be had there. But you mentioned one other game that you wanted to talk about was Odd Sparks. What gives that
Yes.
game its variety take?
Odd Sparks and Automation Adventure is the full title, which kind of gives you a hint as to what they're mixing. It is a third person over the shoulder kind of adventure game, where your task is to discover the world. A la, in some way at least, a satisfactory type of discovery. You're going out and you're finding things, but then you're you're coming back to a certain area, and you're doing quests for these townspeople while you're out and about, discovering things. And then as you go, you kind of learn, oh, I can automate the harvesting of wood from trees using a building, and then I can automate the crafting of sawn timbers from that wood using another building. Oh, and then I can tell these little creatures, these little fantasy creatures that you learn how to make along the way, to walk down this road that not like a road like in Captive Industry, but actually almost like a belt path, to walk down this specifically defined road, and deliver the wood from the sawmill harvesting from the tree to, or the whatever it's called, harvesting from the tree, to the sawmill that's making the timbers. And now you've got timbers automated, from being harvested from the tree, to being delivered to the sawmill. And then you have an endless supply of timbers, and then you can use the timbers for this, and you can use the logs for something else. And I don't want to give the whole game away, but it's kind of a surprising entry into the sort of factory genre or genre adjacent anyway.
Yeah, and they almost look like little Pikmin following you around in one of the
Right.
videos I saw. They're very cute. It's got a really cool graphical style that I think is also fun.
Yes. So that was kind of a surprising discovery of mine on Steam Next Fest. I think one or two Next Fests ago, which I'm a very very active or um, strong proponent of that particular feature on Steam is the Next Fest and the X whatever the thing is Fest. They did a base builder fest last year one time, and they do a fest every month or two, I think, but it's with different genres. And I like the fact that they take all of these games and they kind of bring them forward to you and say, "Hey, here's a list of new games that are out, or there's demo, or they're coming out soon. You know, look at these." Like it helps with discovery, but it helps me as a content creator too to find new games to play that I might not have found otherwise just by searching. Because I wouldn't have known to search for automation necessarily to find odd sparks, but when I saw it, I was like, "Oh, this game's look interesting." And then I was super surprised to find that there was logistics and well, I knew there was automation because it was in the subtitle, but I was really super surprised to find there was logistics in it, and that it actually is a factory game hidden in an adventure game, which, to some extent, at least satisfactory, is the opposite of that. It's a adventure game hidden in a factory game.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. So what are okay, so you mentioned I should have written down the list that you said. What are yeah, what are some of the other ones you want to hit on?
So, games like Shapes and Beltex come to mind because they're kind of their minimalist style, but they're still factory games. They're definitely factory games. They're kind of a little more, maybe a little idle too. But, the fact that you are taking in a belt or mining or collecting a belt of something, and Shapes its shapes, and in Beltex its numbers, and you're belting those things to another machine of some kind that's processing them in some way, and then passing them on to maybe another machine, etc., to be delivered, really has that factory genre, even though it's in that sort of minimalist, almost idle level of a game. And even some others I mentioned it earlier, like Builderment, which is also a very minimalist looking game, but it's really a fully featured 2D Factorio factory game, kind of a hybrid between Factorio and Factory Town. Whereas it's got a lot of like town-based components to it. You're kind of given the impression that you're building parts of a town almost, but also it's a lot more like Factorio in that you're really focusing on the logistics and the automation part of it. I played that, I don't know, last year sometime maybe. So that one kind of stood out. Desynced also stands out as a kind of early access entry as well. It is very focused on programming, uh, programming your robots. It's got like a visual programming language built in, and you don't necessarily have to do it, but it makes the bots a lot more efficient if you can program them to do specific tasks, or to go from point A to point B is actually not really even the programming aspect really, but you can use them to do kind of um, some key functionality uh, much more efficiently than if you just said, "Hey, you have a bunch of bots, you have a bunch of bots in Factorio, and they're just doing whatever." You can actually focus them down and minimize kind of waste in their tasks.
Yeah, I just started playing Desynced on my last stream for the first time because it's been on my list for a long time and it's been really
Hmm.
cool so far. But I haven't even gotten into the little kind of visual flowchart programming thing that you can do. Which, speaking of programming, there's also a classic which is Autonauts, and Autonauts has a very factory slash automation vibe to it, but it takes its variety from being almost like a programming game above automation and logistics, because
Yeah.
every single bot that you create, you have to give it its own little code. Now you can copy paste code from one to another, and you can use these things called signs to kind of almost have like a variable reference in terms of location and stuff. But But it's such a cool game, and I would really recommend Autonauts to anyone that's looking for another kind of take on the genre, because it does fulfill a lot of that automation and factory itch. You know, you do need to get logs, you do need to get planks, you do need to turn those planks
Hmm.
into poles, and you do need to use those things to craft other ingredients. And there's a tech tree, and you have these colonists that you need to produce food for them to basically make research points. So it's really cool, but yeah, it's also got a lot of these programming elements to it that kind of make it different. One other
Yeah.
one that I really wanted to hear from you about, because I've seen some videos of it, is Factor Y.
Factor Y, yeah, that's so I have a real close relationship with the developer that he reached out to me. I don't remember when it was now, over a year ago, probably a year and a half ago, and asked me to take a look at his game. And back then, it was called Combine and Conquer, which kind of doesn't really make sense for what the game does unless you really take a specific look at what another use of the word conquer, I guess, because there's no enemies, which it makes the original game name of the game, it makes it sound like there's enemies uh, with the conquer, but you're just conquering um, the world, or conquering the fact that you're harvest, you're winning the game in a way. So changing the name of the game really, I think, helps the game, because it's not maybe misleading you into thinking there's combat and enemies and tower defense or anything like that. So Factor Y is kind of another take on a 2D factory game a la Factorio, but this one introduces interplanetary aspects of the game in about the mid game. I actually recently just got there in a playthrough that I'm doing on YouTube, and but it doesn't, like Factorio, they kind of, with 1.0, they kind of left off there, and Space Age is gonna bring us the interplanetary stuff, but this kind of introduces it right there in the mid game, where okay, now you've conquered this planet you're on, at least in terms of you are harvesting the resources that are available. You're making enough of the science items to called research tokens to advance your research. You've unlocked the ability to set up a launching platform, and now you're going to go to other planetary bodies in the solar system that you're in to harvest. Right now, one, but very soon to be two. I don't know how very soon. I don't know if it's coming in the next version, or uh, the next major beta release. But soon to be two resources that are only found off world from your initial starting world. So you have to go to one of them's on one moon, and the other one's going to be on the other moon that is orbiting the planet you're on. So that's where you start from. And I don't know if his intention is to add additional unique resources to some of the other planets to kind of help you drive you toward them. But there's, I think, 11 planetary bodies in the system, moons and planets, and you can go to each one of them. And some of the interesting stuff is he's got like some orbital mechanics and some kind of timing built into how long it takes you to travel from one body to the other, depending on not just distance but also the delta V of that planet's I guess that would be the orbital uh, trajectory or orbital speed or whatever it is.
Yeah, starting to get some
I'm not
Kerbal
a
Space
scientist.
Program up in here.
Yes, it's not quite that level. It's very simplified. You don't have to really do anything other than provide enough fuel to accomplish it. But you go to the nearest moon, which is named at, or one of the moons that's got the current uh, uh, available resource, titanium, on it, and that moon is named after one of the other YouTubers and friend of mine who also was playing it early on. Call me Jeff. So that moon is Jeff, and so you go there and you'll set up another base there, but you have to take some stuff with you, or you have to build completely from scratch, because you don't have the infrastructure you had on the starting planet called Hope. You don't have the infrastructure that you had from there before. So now you have to either bring stuff with you or start over again, and then start mining some titanium, and then decide what to do with it. You can ship it back to Hope. You can make stuff with it there on Jeff, or you can do what you want with it. whichever way you want to do it, or both for that matter. And then the other moon, which is named after me, Wally,
Ooh,
is
fun.
doomed to have uranium. Um, and that will be the sort of first unique source of uranium in that sort of initial, planetary system throughout the whole star system.
That's cool. What with the automation itself, like belts and buildings and stuff, are there any
Mhm.
unique takes on that, or is it pretty standard? Like inserters put things on belts, and then you put things in machines, and they process it, kind of
That's
stuff.
that's pretty standard, except one big thing with the belts that's different compared to say Factorio is there are no undergrounds.
Oh,
Instead of having undergrounds, you have crossings. So while you can cross belts easily enough, like you would do in Factorio with undergrounds. You can just use crossings, and the items kind of jump from one side to the other to meet up with the to continue along on their belt path, and they don't mix at all. Um, you don't have underground, so you can't go under machines, you can't go under inserter arms, you can only go across belts, which adds a bit of a difference to the puzzle compared to most of the other factory games where you you build an underground, or in Satisfactory you build a elevator and go open over, or however you want to do it. You don't have that in Factor Wise. So you have to really figure out how you're going to puzzle the belts through, avoiding the inserter arms and things a little bit. And there's a couple of times where it's really caught me because I'm like, I can just go under. I can't go under that arm or
yeah,
that whatever's in the way.
yeah. That is interesting. That makes me think a little bit of Mindustry, which is another title that is kind of a that one's more of
It's
a
one that I
mix of
forgot about.
factory and tower defense.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that one also just has crossings with belts. So, with all of these, you've played far more in terms of the quantity of games.
Hmm.
But what is, or I should say, what are some of your favorites of all of them?
Again, leaving out the big three, which Factorio still is the lead for me. But then Satisfactory is very good. Dyson Sphere program. I haven't played it since the combat update. I'm a little, like mentioned earlier, I'm a little shaky on combat to begin with. But I understand that it's a little bit more, as you mentioned earlier, like tower defensey, maybe, where they don't destroy your base, they just destroy your defenses, maybe. So I might get into it again sometime soon and take a look at that. But beyond those big three, Factory Town is kind of a perennial favorite of mine. I really like how that game works and how it kind of goes in. I'm looking forward to where Tectonica and Foundry both go. They're both kind of still at that early feeler stage for me, where I'm not sure if they're going to hold, or if they're going to be or if they're gonna really maybe nudge one of the other ones out of their place, or or where they're going to fall depending on how they develop those two games. Um, Beyond that, Factor Y, like I said, I have a pretty good working relationship with the developer, Martin, and he's got a lot of good ideas, and he's taking a lot of feedback from folks. So that one I'm kind of looking forward to and keeping up with as well. Captain of Industry as well, as maybe like a fourth to the big three, even though it's a little bit somewhat a little bit a factory adjacent rather than straight up factory game. That's the kind of the way that works with the terraforming, the particle based mining, all the truck logistics and things like that is kind of a really interesting take on it for me. And I would say keep an eye on Oddsparks too, because as that kind of expands out, as they continue development and they add more biomes. There's only two now. There's at least one more planned. And it's like I want to keep an eye on that one too. As kind of a very very early. This is a very interesting game to take a look at.
Yeah. So, out of your list as well, if there's one that you could recommend to viewers
Hmm.
to try out, what would it be? Obviously, not one of the big three.
Um, it depends on your personal kind of feelings for things, but Factor Y is a little bit tough to get started because you only start with a minimum number of things, but you can really build big in it. Um, Factory Town's a great way to get started into the genre. So I really that's one I can recommend to somebody who's maybe not so much of a factory game player yet, but they would like to get started. That's a really good one to get started with. And then for the more experienced, seasoned Factorio, Satisfactory, Dyson Sphere players, Foundry and Tectonica really are good ones to expand your current addiction into more. And then also, for the entry level people too, not just Factory Town, but that the aforementioned Odd Sparks too. It's got a really good entry into the genre from another genre,
Yeah,
similar
that's
to the way that
cool.
Satisfactory was for a lot of folks who were into you know the the adventure games.
Yeah. What releases are you looking forward to that's, coming up in the next months?
Um, I and everything on this list really. As they kind of come up with new updates and new features or whatever. Um, but I kind of like I said, I'll in like a week's time, I think it is, yeah, a week from tomorrow, I'll be taking a look at hopefully some new demos or preview or prologue or whatever versions of some new games that will hopefully pique my interest, and I'll be featuring those on my YouTube channel. Sometimes I stream one of them also, but that's kind of what I look forward to is kind of that cycle. Looking out further, I'm looking at again, Factorio Space Age is definitely high on my list of things that I'm watching for. But otherwise, it's this list of games that we've talked about, and you know what the next update will give us as far as a new content. Um, Unfortunately, or fortunately, unfortunately for me, I don't really delve out into other genres all that much. Sort of a little bit of adjacent game is like the Planet Crafter, which just released 1.0 last month, and they've already got like a 1.1 version with some additional new content that's out. Or maybe a little more than a month ago, 1.0. But that has some factory and automation in it, but primarily it's a survival adventure game, and that's one that's on my list of my favorites that I've been keeping an eye on since it's been in early access, and I'm happy to see 1.0, and I'm happy to see what they do for any other content updates from this point onward. Um, but really, that's it. I kind of keep an eye on the genre, but also on the handful of games that I'm playing currently or have played recently, and just kind of keep an eye out for new content that they're going to release because I play a lot of games in the early access phase, and so there's always new content for them every couple of months or so, and there's not ever a dearth of new content and new games in the genre to play. Like it's overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, it really is. There's so much if you look for it. Um, so yeah, what and I know we're going a little bit long here, but I since you've played so many different kinds of games from a game design perspective, we've talked about how automation and logistics are kind of the core elements that tie all these games together, but we've also dove dived a little
Oven.
bit dove into just the different, like, obviously there's different takes on these things, but what would you say really makes a factory game unique and not just another entry? Because I'm sure a lot of game devs, as they're working on these games, are thinking like, okay, I'm making a factory game. I want my factory game to feel different. Kind of like even I was asking with Tectonica, like, why wouldn't I just play Satisfactory? You don't
Hmm.
want players asking that about your game, really. You want players to look at your game and be like, oh, that's special. That's different. I want to try that. So what makes those things really stick out? I don't know if you have kind of an underlying, idea on that, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
And I don't think it's always the same type thing either. It's just that sort of take or aspect of the genre that the developer focuses on more. And like I said with Tectonica, the whole drilling out the cave to make it bigger is kind of an interesting gameplay. It's a little bit like of a reverse, maybe not even reverse. like C block or Sky block if you're a Minecraft player. Of like you have to expand if you're gonna build your factory bigger, you have to make your land, or in this case, your cave bigger. So that's really one of the strong, for that one specifically, it's one of the strong things. But it's touted by the community at least as, oh, it's satisfactory in a cave, and it is. There's no denying that it's satisfactory in a cave, but it's the cave and the look of the cave, and that the farming stuff that I mentioned too, that makes it different than satisfactory. Like it's those little things for me anyway. It's the little things that the game introduces that makes it unique, that makes me want to play it.
Yeah, for sure. I found with Factory Town, the coin system and like the villager, like trying to meet your villagers' needs
Hmm.
and having that coin system is almost this like it's not research, it's not, tech points because that's its own thing as well, but it's almost this like tertiary system and other
Almost
games
like a
just
mini
don't
game.
even. Yeah, exactly. And other games don't even have that. And then
Hmm.
you can use those coins for rewards, to like
Hmm.
speed up buildings, but you don't have to. And I just found that really, really cool. Um, I think Factory Town is my sleeper game on the list, even though it's not my favorite. I think Factorio is definitely my favorite, and I would recommend, Factorio and Satisfactory first, probably to anybody. But Factory Town, for those who have played other Factory games, if you haven't tried Factory Town, it will suck you in. And it
Hmm.
looks like you said when you said it looked like Crayola and what was it?
Windows XP.
Yeah, Crayola and Windows XP, it's like it does not look like the game that it actually is. And so don't
Yeah.
judge it by its cover and don't judge it by the first 30 minutes of playing because the UI is probably not the best UI ever made. Um, but once you've gotten a couple hours into it, it really just captures you in a way that I was not expecting when I played it.
And it's simple enough too that if you're not a hardcore factory math gamer person, you're not calculating ratios or anything like that. If you're not into that, you don't have to. Like you can just
Right.
say, I'm going to build one building making, or I'm going to have a farming grain, and then I'm going to have one building turning that grain into flour, and I'm going to have another building turning that flour into bread, and that's going to be good enough for me. I may not be the most optimal player, but that's good enough for me. But then you can also say, okay, I'm going to figure out how many buildings I need to make, one bread per whatever time interval, how many bread per minute, or whatever you want to do for your factory part of it. And then, okay, I need this many kitchens to make the bread, and I need this many grain mills to make the flour, and I need this much farming to actually get enough grain going. But then there's the logistic puzzle too of, oh, now there's too much grain for a shoot, so now I need to have two shoots, one to each grain mill, or whatever it is, to to make sure that I can have enough throughput for all the grain that I want to push into the grain mill. And then you can get into the puzzle and the calculations and the things like that, but you don't have to. You can build a nice looking town that has all the things in it, and um, you could use all, hu- uh, you know human or little people, looking, for those of you who were born before 1990 when they changed little people, all the little people where they hop around the town and carry, logistic all your items from building to building. You could stay at that level and it's still a fun game to play there. But if you then want to get into, the very hardcore factory, you can. And that's why
Yeah.
it's you're right. It's definitely a sleeper, but it's actually a really good game to kind of get into the genre.
And it has a campaign, which I find to
Yes.
be really cool because you can work through the campaign levels and it kind of unlocks more and more of the technology as you go. So it's not just this sandbox like, oh, I don't even know where to start. The campaign is really fun. The only downside is that you do kind of have to rebuild your like initial infrastructure at the beginning of some of the later levels. They try to
Yeah.
like sort of give it to you, but it's not really the way you want it. So that part can be a little frustrating, but overall the campaign is a really nice feature that Factory Town has that again, it's like a lot of games don't have a campaign. even
Yeah.
even Factorio, which is the goat, quote unquote, it's got like these sort of tutorial levels, but I wouldn't call it a campaign. It's more just like this is kind of how you play the game.
Well, and
Um,
for a minute there, they did try to do a campaign, and then they just scrapped it entirely because that's not what their players wanted. The players wanted the hardcore factory sandbox. And so they
Exactly.
say,
Yeah.
let's not spend time on this when nobody's going to play it.
Yeah.
But back to Factory Town, I think the campaign levels start out with the town, not the factory, and you have to decide if you want to stick with the town or if you want to make the factory.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, there's just I feel like we could talk about this for another 3 hours because there's just so much here. There were so many
Yeah,
games you listed that we didn't even really talk about much.
for sure.
But before we close, are there any other specific games that you want to highlight as like, oh, this had a variety take on it that I really found cool?
No, I think we covered the major bits. We didn't talk about a few of the games on the list, and they had uniqueness to them. But I think we got the bigger titles, or the kind of the most interesting titles. And then from there, it's just okay. Maybe this one focuses again a little bit different, but it kind of comes together with a little bit of the same in the end, of the same general concept in the end.
Yeah. Do you have any other closing thoughts on the factory automation gaming world?
I don't think so. Just play them, and if you find one that I don't know about, poke me about it, and I'll take a look at it and see if I can put my take on it. I like playing them. I like featuring them. I like talking about them. And I will play just about any factory game that makes an appearance, just to see what it's about, just to see what it's like, just for the curiosity, to satisfy my curiosity about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. On that note, where can people find you? Do you have a Discord or?
Yeah, so we have a Discord. It's a shared Discord between Calidorn, Call Me Jeff, Lana, and myself. We're all content creators. Both YouTube and Twitch, in pretty much every case. A little bit more focus for some of us on one or the other. But I do both. I release new content on YouTube every day, and I stream 4 times a week. Um, Usually almost always evenings US time. So unfortunately for the Europeans in they're listening, it's a little bit tough for them, but I do put all my streams on YouTube as well. So it's all there and available if you want to see it. Everything is Wally1169, YouTube, Twitch, um, Steam for that matter. But also, and then on our Discord is the Chill Gaming and Friends Discord, and I think you can find a link to it in my Discord description, and on my in my abouts on both YouTube and Twitch.
Yeah, and I'll put links to all of Wally's social stuff in the podcast notes as well. Do you have a
Awesome,
Patreon?
thank you. I do, and it's /Wally1169 as well.
Awesome. Yeah, go check out Wally's YouTube and Twitch, and check out his videos. He's got all sorts of content of a lot of the games that we've talked about, other than the ones he hasn't played yet. And yeah, if you guys know of more factory games, that we didn't list. I mean, I have a few that I was thinking about that weren't on that list myself, because there's just so many. And like I was saying earlier, since the genre is blowing up, there's so many, and not all of them are great, but there's so many that are at least worth trying and worth looking into. And so if you find some that are good, hit me up, hit Wally up. We'd love to hear about it. For those of you listening, if you'd like to support the podcast, head over to patreon.com/Krydax. I am so thankful to my patrons. Patreon is a really cool platform because it allows you to start and stop whenever you want. You can set whatever support level you want. It's, there's not really a commitment to it beyond, you're just supporting for as long as you want to. And it's a really great way to support the content creators that you love, like Wally or myself. If you want to, help keep the podcast going, or whoever it is that you watch, I highly recommend using Patreon rather than other means, because the creators get to keep a lot more of the money. So if your goal is just to support the creator, Patreon is usually the best way to do that. But of course, there's no pressure. You guys know, hopefully you know what you need to do with your money, and don't let me or anyone else tell you otherwise. So, I trust you guys to be wise financially, but if supporting the podcast is part of that, well, I appreciate it a whole heck of a lot. And yeah, you get some special benefits that you can, see on the Patreon channel, like Discord colors and stuff like that. So all that to say, thank you to all of my patrons and YouTube subs and Twitch subs and all that. You guys are the best. Next week, plan to stream the cast at the standard time. This stream was a little bit off the standard time, but the standard time is Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. UTC, and I'll put a post on the Discord if that changes. Wally, it has been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Glad to do it. Thanks for having me.
You've shared a lot of wonderful knowledge with us, and it's been great to hear from you. I know, you have more experience than a lot of us do with just the variety of games. So it's been really cool hearing about the different things that make those games special. For you listeners, if you guys have any questions or ideas for topics or ideas for guests or any more thoughts for Wally, head over to the Crydania Discord and let us know there. I'll put a link in the description to that. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week. Always remember, the factory must grow.
Bye.
All right. That is a wrap. That was great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out. Twitch people seem to have some fun. Let's see, I wasn't paying super close attention, but someone said they were curious to hear about Final Factory. That was one that we didn't talk about much.
Yeah, there's just some. I only played it a little, actually. I did I think I played the demo or an early version. I need to get back to it, but it's interesting because it's all in space. You're mining asteroids and things.
Yeah, I think I played the demo for like an hour myself.
Yeah, but it's still like 2D. Like I don't think there's really a 3D aspect to it at all. It's all kind of flat. But I don't really have a whole lot of strong feel for it because I only played enough to do like one episode, I think, for a feature. And
that one felt like a game that was kind of like, I will play this if someone else tells me it's amazing, but it kind of feels a bit like it's a standard factory game and it's doing standard factory things. And I didn't really see anything that stuck out to me as like, that's really something that makes this game special and, sticking out to be something that is worth my time. I don't know. I'm pretty picky.
Yeah. And for me, I think it's depending on how much it sticks out to me is how much I'll go back to it too.
Yeah.
Like for me, I'll probably play them all, once, at least to do a single episode feature on YouTube or a single stream or something like that. But if I'm going to go back to it, especially if it's an early access and they're releasing new content and things, then it's got to have something interesting that sticks out to me. But then again, just because it doesn't mean I'm going to have time to get back to it either. So it's kind of a rough balance of, do I have time to play combined with everything else that I'm also playing? I mean, I've got 4 concurrent series running on YouTube right now because I have so many games I want to play.
Nice.
And I'm playing, 2 games on Twitch right now. And there's just a huge, or 3 games really on Twitch right now. And there's just so much of a huge, amount of stuff that there's just not enough time.
Yep. Too many games, not enough time. That's classic.
Yep.
Well, I will let you get back to your Sunday. Thank you again for taking time out of your day to be with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. See you next time.
Bye.
All right. Wonderful podcast. I can't believe we're already 11 episodes in, for what it's worth. I feel like we just started the podcast the other day still, and we're already 11 episodes. It's almost been 3 months. I don't have any gaming to add on to the podcast this time. I think I'm deciding, whether it's by default or subconscious intentionality, but I think I'm kind of deciding the podcast streams are just going to be podcast streams. And if I end up doing a gaming stream, it'll probably be, after lunch or something after the podcast, and it's not going to be part of the same stream. So at least moving forward, I think you guys can all just expect like the podcast stream is just the podcast, and then that's it. It's probably easier to keep my ducks separated that way as well. Yeah. Go sub to my YouTube channel. I normally don't ask for that, but we're so close to 5,000, so that's extra exciting. And I'm going to do an 8-hour stream of Greg Tech New Horizons as a celebration for hitting 5K, and that will most likely be sometime this week, because at least theoretically, I'll hit 5K in the next day or two or three, possibly. So there will be a Greg Tech New Horizons stream, and it'll be a big one. So, oh, Wally, congratulations. Go sub to Wally as well. He's almost to 5,000. That's so exciting. We're both going to hit it this week, probably. Yeah, so you guys go sub to Wally, go sub to me. Just this once, I will ask for subs. um, but yeah, awesome, Wubbles. Glad to have you here. And yeah, I'll upload this podcast to the normal podcast sites, and then you guys can expect to see a Greg Tech stream coming in the next days. I will announce on the Discord what day it's going to be, at least in a day or two in advance. There's a link to my YouTube for sure in the About section down here somewhere. And let me grab Wally's channel, and I'll paste a link in the here in the Twitch, because not everyone can link. So there's a link to Wally's YouTube. So go sub to Wally, go sub to me. I'll paste a link in Twitch to mine too, since I'm gonna, complain and ask for subs, I'll at least post a link so you guys can find it nice and easy. There you go. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm gonna head out for today. You guys all have a wonderful Sunday, and we will see you next time. See you later, trousers. See you, Dave.